G'day, my name is Reese and I'm going to take you through how the TodoMVC example with the PlastronJS works. Hopefully you've seen my blog and seen how to install it. If not, there's the information from my blog. So what we're going to do is go back to Sublime and have a look, see how it works. So the top bit here is the Goo.require statements. This is going to be all your dependency management, which close your handles. So I'm getting some DOMs there, and what I'm going to start off with is using the list model. So I require TodoMVC.listModel. So let's have a look at list model and see what we're actually starting up. When I have a look at list model, I can see the first thing I do is I start up a schema. Well, actually, the first thing I do is I extend mvc.collection. So list model is going to be of type collection. I'm then setting up a schema where if I do a .get on completed, this is what I'm going to return here. So I'm going to get the models and I'm going to filter it by whether or not each model is completed. The next thing I put in here is pretty important. It's the models true. And this is used by the schema to tell it that I'm using the models underneath the collection to help calculate what I'm going to return on the completed. And the reason this is important is that the collection needs to know when things have changed for the completed, because it needs to know when to fire handlers. Underneath, I've got goo.base. So I'm calling my MVC collection base. I'm giving it an ID, and I've also given it a sync here. Now, if I have a look at the sync, it inherits from local sync, extend local sync, and all I'm overriding is the read. So the .save will call the to.json, and the .read will be called here. So if I look at the .read, I'm looking at the model.getID, so I'm getting whatever's underneath the ID, and I'm saying with that ID, look underneath it. I'm saying for everything in the array, so I'm getting an array from the store. For each to do, start a new model to do. Now with the new model, if I go back into here, I can see I'm also passing across a model type. So every time I call new model on the list model, it's going to create a new model of to-do model, and it's going to add that in. So let's have a quick look at to-do model. To-do model extends mvc.model, so it's basically a model at heart. And I've got two functions running on it here. Now, in this before you saw I started up a schema. In this case, I've got something called a setter. Now, a setter is just another way of setting rules on the schema. It just allows you to do it by calling a function rather than creating an object literal and passing it in. So in this case, because it's a setter, I'm saying every time I set the title, I am going to get that title which is trimmed, and then if it doesn't have a length, so if I've trimmed it and there's nothing there, I'm going to throw a validation error because it doesn't validate. And if not, I'm going to return the normal thing. Now, what happens when this validate error is this function in here gets run. I've set the error handler, so an error handler will look for validate errors and will run whatever's in there. So in this case, I'm calling this .dispose. So I'm saying if I'm passing null string, I'm going to dispose of the model. And we can see that. If we jump in here, I get rid of here, I click enter, that model's being disposed. So that's the to-do model, and that's going to be created through list model anytime we call new model on. So we've gone back to the sync, I've created every new model. Now we can see that when I create the new model, I'm passing in true. What true does is it suppresses all the change handlers that happen when you create a new model. And the reason I'm doing that is because I may be creating lots of models here. I might be creating hundreds of them depending on how many to-do items there are. And I don't want every single one to fire a change. I'm going to instead make all the changes, and then at the end I'm saying, okay, now I've made all the changes, I've added all the new models, now fire the change and let things update. So that's the list sync. If I come back here, I've seen the list sync, I've seen the schema, I know the model that comes in, and so that's it. I've created the list model. Going back to app.js, see I'm passing the list model into list.control. So I'm creating a new list control, and then I'm decorating this element to do app. So if I have a look inside index.html, I can see this element to do app. It's here, so it's the main section. So the control is being decorated with this DOM here. So the control is going to be able to get a handle on any of these elements. So let's go back to list control. That's going to be in list control. So I've created it and I've decorated it. So when I create it, I've got this thing here called a filter. And the default I'm using is the all. Now I've enumerated what the different filters are here. So the filters are going to return either true for all of it, or we've got things here where we call the model. Now you can see here I'm called model.getCompleted. Now the model in this case is going to be my, well, what I pass in is going to be the list. So in this case I'm calling .getCompleted, which we saw in the schema. So what this is going to do is return a list of the models that are completed. So let's just go back and have a look. We see I called it, I'm getting it, and for any change I'm changing this, but what I'm doing is I'm getting all the completed from here. So back to list control. What I'm doing is then I've already got the DOM, so I don't have to create it. All I have to do is say, well, okay, now the control's been initialized and it's now in the document. First thing I'm going to do is call the base, and that's just because enter document actually comes from goo.ui component, so we want to let it go and do all the stuff it normally does. I'm just getting a handle here for my model, and then what I'm doing is I'm saying get the elements underneath this control which fit this selector. So I'm saying get all the inputs, get the first one. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying on any event which is a key up, run this. But as you can see here, I've passed in a second argument which is a class. So what I'm saying is that anything which has to do entry, which as you can see here, the class to do entry, then you're going to run this. So it actually has a listener on the base element that will get fired for any key up, but it's going to go through and it's going to say, wait, does the element have this class or does it have that class above it? So it knows it's in this file, that whatever you've clicked now is in here. There's an element underneath a to-do entry class. So first thing I'm going to do is say, if it's not an enter, return. So I press anything in there, nothing happens. If I press return and there's no string or it trims at 0, so it could all be spaces, do nothing. Else I'm going to create a new model with whatever value. So if I put in a value, it's going to create a new model and it's going to be trimmed. Now, the new model, as we remember, was a to-do model. Next thing I'm saying, if I click on a clear completed, so here's the clear completed, if I click on it, dispose all the models which are completed. So in this case, you can see I use list.getCompleted again to just get the completed models, and I dispose all of those. Next one I do is toggle completed. So that's when I click here. It's going to go through every single model for each models, go through and set the completed as whether or not I checked or unchecked it. Now this is going to be an interesting one. There's an any model change here. Any model change means that I've changed something to any of the models underneath it. So anytime I've changed a model, I want to refresh the view. Now there are two ways to update a collection. You can either update the entire lot anytime anything changes, or you can let the controls deal with whatever is inside them themselves and just deal with basically changing the controls around, taking them in, putting them out, or changing the sort order. In this case, because it's simpler to write and easy to understand, I've just gone for refreshing the entire thing anytime something's changed. Now, I've also said save it because I want to be able to, any change that's being made should be saved to the local storage and I should be able to pull it back out again. Now here I've used this .model change to do any model change because I don't really care if things like an ID have changed or a title's changed. This won't change. This only needs to change if the sort order has changed or things have been removed or inputted. And what I'm running when this happens is the show main footer. So the shape of the model has changed. Now I need to show the main footer or hide it depending on whether or not I've got a length. So here's the main bit, here's the footer. If I remove that, you can see it gets hidden. If I put things back in, it gets shown. So anytime a model is added or removed, it's going to run through and say, should I show this?